this wasn't playtime anymore. And so I went.
Where's my money? How's it going?
I went through the whole thing.
They were a New York hedge fund guy.
When do I get my return?
Yeah. And the next thing you know, they asked for a sales update. And I said, I think it's going pretty well. Mike, why don't you give the sales update? And it wasn't good sales. It wasn't awful, but we didn't paint it as like.
It was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. We didn't paint it correctly.
Yeah.
And one of the board guys goes, "Do not shine the turd, ever." I'm Kass.
I'm Mike.
And we're the Lazerows. And we're on
Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Elliott. Welcome to another episode of the show. Kass and Mike. Mike and Kass.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thanks
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
I usually ask my guests, how did you get this job?
So I would say for me, I've always been entrepreneurial. I actually met up with a friend from elementary school, hadn't seen her in 35 years. She actually told me about a story. I used to make barrettes and I sold them all over the school. Apparently I was known for this.
Oh.
Totally forgot. So
early baller.
Yeah. So always been entrepreneurial and wanted to do my own things and create companies that had good cultures.
And I'm the same. I'm unemployable. Started first company in college and beginning of Web 1.0, which dates me, and never turned back.
I want to push back on this employable thing because I relate to this because I feel like I'm cut from that same cloth. At the same time, kind of looking back on my little career, with the exception of one person, and I'll shout out Chris Saito, Chris was like my only good boss who like nurtured me, wasn't intimidated by me, my hustle, my work ethic, ambition. All the rest of them were so guarded. So I wonder, like, is that true? Like, are you truly unemployable or, is it just the fact that you didn't have someone who could?
I think it's true.
Handle the
and the reason why I say I think it's true, one of my idols I got to work with, Mark Benioff.
Never had.
And when we started, he said, listen, if we cut open our arms, it's the same blood. It's entrepreneurial blood. It's very different than most of the people at Salesforce. I want you to be happy. I want you to do great work. I want you to own your mental health and the work you do. If you're not happy, do something else. I know you're an entrepreneur. For some reason, we buy these companies and they hate me after it. I want you to kind of embrace that entrepreneurship and bring that blood to this company.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had corporate experiences though. So you don't have a resume. I actually went out and got jobs and kind of was working on the corporate ladder. So I agree with you for the most part. There are not a lot of good bosses out there. I have a philosophy that you're born like a manager or you're not. And so I think with that philosophy, you're going to run up against a lot of people who, like you said, are either guarded, they're going to step on you to rise above you, and they're not going to cheerlead you. Like, they're just going to constrain everything you think.
Yeah. And so I asked this in the context of that. I know a lot of our audience, a lot of them are younger. They're coming right out of school. They're trying to figure out their path. But at the same time, there's people who are sort of like halfway done, like me, and they're just like, man, I'm not really crazy about where I'm at right now. I did this because, I could make a ton of money, but I'm not really happy. And so I'm always kind of in search of that answer. I'm curious about people. I also think it's a nature-nurture thing, so I will continue to wrestle you on this idea of unemployability. I am definitely unemployable at this point, but it's by choice.
By choice is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Same with him.
Yeah. Because I think management, can be learned. Like, maybe I'd argue that leadership, is tougher because like leaders lead, managers manage. I feel like those are learnable skills. I even think entrepreneurship for me is learnable because I definitely just wanted to go into the corporate machine and grow, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can continue to debate this issue. So you started with barrettes and you started, I guess, at the top of the mountain with Mark Benioff.
No, that was very late. I mean, I started in college. I was, roommates with Seth Meyers in the Fiji house at Northwestern University.
Cool.
And he just reminded me of the story that I used to do University Wire, my news service, from a chair that was filled with rats in the 4th floor of that house. And for me, it was always about the rabbit hole, whatever I was working on. And once I go down that rabbit hole, it's very hard for me to get out of it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs talk about this, where they get very myopic. And
can be a good thing.
And at the time, there's only 13 million people on the internet. So we're not talking about, if you wanted to make a lot of money, you would have never started in the internet. That there's no money, right? Think about 1994 for those of you who are old and remember. And so our careers have been one of like finding the next wave, getting really interested in it and writing it. By the time we sold to Salesforce, it was basically a 20-some year overnight success story. It was not a quick, journey.
Yeah. So what's your take on, the book is great. It's a very personal story of your journeys. There's a lot about relationships. I think that's something that everyone can relate to. We're all in some sort of relationship, whether it's with a romantic partner or the people we work with.
Right.
Talk about embracing failure. Let's start there, maybe.
I think I would start with golf.com. I think Mike and I have learned more from that experience than anything as an entrepreneur. So I started that company with another co-founder before I got Mike on board. And that was in 1998. So it was like the .com boom. And
yeah, I remember 1998. Not every company had a website. Most of it was dial-up, and the website loaded like one frame at a time.
Exactly.
This is so awesome.
Yeah. So I had this idea that if we could create golf content and get it out to as many eyeballs as we could, Mike had the idea to syndicate the content, which is great because golfers, had a huge disposable income at that point, and golfers are crazy. Like I was a crazy golfer.
But wait, this is like pre-Tiger Woods era, right? This is 98.
Correct.
Yeah.
Timing is everything.
Yeah.
So
us before.
Oh wait, but you didn't grow up golfing.
I
did.
did.
A tennis player.
I was a tennis player, and then I was a golfer too. So I played tennis in college, and then I walked onto the golf team and
got a double threat.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So I was convinced because one of my brothers and my dad and I were sending around a spreadsheet that would calculate whose fairways hit, number one in that, handicap. My brother and I came up with like the closest handicap we could to the formula. And every time I got that spreadsheet back, he would cheat. And I was somehow like always last in everything. So I had said to Mike, like, how do we lock this up? There's got to be a way. And then he said, oh my God, what if you created not only a site, but start syndicating that content, which is great. By 99, December 23rd, I remember it very well, 1999, we sold it to chipshot.com. And they were based in Sunnyvale, California. They were making custom golf clubs. So the most expensive place in the world to be making custom golf clubs. But they bought us. They acquired us. It was an all-stock deal. Our board was super psyched. They were going public in April of 2000. And in March, we got a call from the president that said, hey, Sequoia backed out. We're not going public, and actually we have one more week of runway and we're going bankrupt.
Good news. Okay.
Yes. So
maybe back up, ask a couple of follow-up questions. So this was golf.com?
Yeah, well, yep, it was golf.com.
Okay. And how did you get that domain?
So
how much did you pay for it, for example?
Well, you go ahead.
So we bought it for $289,000 from NBC. NBC had owned it because it had a big investment in a company that went bankrupt, and they took control of the domain. And then like a lot of media companies at the time, they didn't really focus on the internet. They're like, let's just sell these off, right?
Yeah. So if you get a thing to sell,
like who needs the internet, right? Yeah. Which tells you a lot about the thinking back then.
Yeah.
So we bid we were willing to go up to $1 million. It only got to $290,289, and we bought it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so give some more context about how old were you guys at that time?
Young.
We started the company. I was 28, 27,
25, 26.
Okay, I mean $250,000 plus is still a lot of money. going upon the domain.
Yeah, well, we had raised money from investors, so that helped.
But what percentage of the net was that? Because, I mean, were you raising?
By the time we sold to ChipShot, we owned, like, I don't know, to combine 60% of the company, and our other co-founder owned the other 30, and then we had a stock option plan for the small group of people.
And my college business I'd started in college, I was talking about, had gone public at this time. Everything was going public. We raised $60 million on a $300 million valuation. Robbie Stevens took us public. You know, this was a time, think about AI today, right? The frenzy around it. Multiplied by 10, that was the internet frenzy. So anything that had a .com, and that's how we got pets.com, eattoys.com.
No.
And so we were early in the internet. No one knew the internet. So we were just like, oh, I assume this golf company, you know, chipshot.com with us would be worth $10 billion. We're also idiots, right? Because we're 25 years old.
Yeah.
So we didn't know anything about anything.
Yeah. I should have registered fb.com back then. It was a great investment.
Imagine?
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, we got punched in the face with that call saying, like, you can buy it back, but you have to raise the money to do it. And we just did what we always do. We started shoveling shit and traveled the country, found the money in Chicago. God bless Keith Bank and the Medina Country Club gentlemen who we'd never been. They invited us in to pitch the membership. And we sold that for $25 million, which is why, to Time Warner, which is why we got to New York City. It's why we're here.
I mean, great.
It couldn't have ended better for us at the time, but we learned a lot about, like, transparency. How do you tell employees you're not going to get paid?
Yeah. I'm still waiting to hear the failure part.
Well, I was going to say, so the failure was that everybody who put in the first angel round, that was wiped out. It was just gone. That was gone.
Including our money.
And we should, like, I had saved, you know, for the 3 or 4 years in the corporate world, I'd saved money, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
I'd love to tell my kids that I saved money. You should too. And that was gone. We had to look our friends and family in the eye and just say everything was wiped out. And we learned a lot about due diligence. And we learned a lot about what are the founders like? And how do you know if they know what they don't know, right? Because that's the best part. Like, when we invest now, we really look into, does the founder know what he or she doesn't know? And do they know how to surround themselves with a team that fills in their gaps?
Yeah. Let's stay on that for a minute. I'm very interested in that. So what is the litmus test? I mean, how do you know?
So every time we do an investment, I go in and I'm digging into the founder or co-founders. I'm going to if they've surrounded themselves with management team.
But you're talking about background checks and, like, you're doing the diligence?
We do background checks.
We do background checks, but we literally I'm having meeting. I mean, a lot of founders don't like it because, you know, within seconds I can tell, like, they're way too full of, you know, an ego and pride, and they think they know everything. But then we'll come across some incredible gems, and they are humble. They're so excited that the team around them is smarter than they are, which is, like, that's gold.
Okay.
Right there.
And no one knows everything, right? So, like, a lot of founders are technical founders. And so you start asking about, what's your go-to-market strategy? And when they start, you kind of know when they're BSing, right? Versus, you know something, I need to hire a great go-to-market because it's not my specialty.
Right.
That self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like Mike Lazerow, Liquid Death, right? He's a creative director. He didn't know about distribution of canned water into, like, convenience stores. And he was very upfront that I'm going to create a great brand. I'm going to have to build a beverage company around me.
Yeah.
And we loved that from the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, just from Kass saying a couple of things about your golf and tennis, I can, like, extract a couple of things from you, that you are extremely competitive.
Beyond belief.
And you don't like to lose. And also you have, you know, if you put, like, what are some of your values, I can see that fairness and justice is up there at the top.
It is. I think it's transparency. I think it's not. So, like, you say that I have a middle kid and he's all about fairness and justice. Call him Judge Judy.
Yeah.
He's going to hate that I said that.
Yeah.
But being the last kid, I was about transparency.
Okay.
So I really wanted to know, just give me the information. No, there's no information that's bad. I don't like surprises.
Yeah.
I think information is power. And so when we start our companies, and this is what I like with the founders that really know how to do this, you talk about leadership and management, they are going to be totally transparent with their entire company. And that's how we led ours. We acted like our employees were part of the board and we were presenting to them.
Yeah, this is actually a really good point. So a part of maybe fleshing out, you know, who's legit or not, or worth investing in or not, you're looking for truth tellers.
Yes. Yes.
And people who can deliver bad news.
Yes.
That say, hey, this has gone wrong, or I messed up.
Exactly.
Because you're here to help fix it, probably.
So one of the things that I think was the biggest lesson learned from golf.com, there were two, I think, besides the fact that we have to do better due diligence. One was when I had to turn to the entire company and say, listen, we messed up. Like, we went with this company and they ran out of money and I have nothing to pay you all. And we're going to get back out on the road and we're going to go forward. And I was like ready for like people to just like take their bags, start screaming, and not one person left. And one of the big lessons was, and it took us a little bit to figure this out, but then we were able to apply it to the next company. We always told them the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
So when there was a massive shift or a pivot or something that happened, they weren't nervous. They knew that we weren't bullshitting them. They knew that we were literally going to take care of them and do everything we could. And our word meant something.
Yeah.
So that was the big thing that we learned. And then the second part that I learned, which was not a fun lesson, was when we restarted the company and raised the money, we had different board members. And these guys were, how do I put it? How would you?
They're sharks.
Sharks. Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Assume all of your investors are sharks.
Yeah.
It's just an easy place to see.
They were sharks and they wanted a status update. We had now, monthly board meetings and, this wasn't playtime anymore. And so I went.
Where's my money? How's it going?
I went through the whole thing.
They were a New York hedge fund guy.
When do I get my return?
Yeah. And the next thing you know, they asked for a sales update. And I said, I think it's going pretty well. Mike, why don't you give the sales update? And it wasn't good sales. It wasn't awful, but we didn't paint it as like.
It was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. We didn't paint it correctly.
Yeah.
And one of the board guys just yells, "Do not shine the turd, ever."
Yeah.
Like that. So.
It's Matt Sarovich.
It was Matt Sarovich.
If you're listening, Matt, thank you.
Took that with me every single day. And that was it. It just cemented that transparency is 100% how you will succeed as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because for those of us who can relate with being pleasers and not wanting to disappoint people,
right?
I'm a firstborn, so I'm sort of a leader, but I'm also I've slot in the parent role at times. In any case, not to pathologize too much, but what you're saying tracks with what I learned from Chris Voss, who's the negotiation boss, wrote that great book, Never Split the Difference. And Chris taught me, he said, lead with the negative. And that will sort of defuse or let think about a rice cooker or steamer or something, lets some of the pressure off.
Correct.
He said, this is going to hurt.
Yeah.
I have bad news to tell you.
Right.
Then you're like bracing. And then you say, lunch is going to be late for, 10 minutes. And you go, oh, is that it? And so it can sort of, it's a strategy.
Yeah.
Truth-telling is a strategy.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive because it seems scary, but it's actually the best policy.
And what's ironic is you have to be a truth teller and you have to be a storyteller, but you can't be a storyteller when it comes to your employees or your board or your investors. So your go-to market strategy you have to be a great storyteller.
Yeah. How does the resilience come into this? I mean, you get through one, you're learning on the job, you're getting
7.5 years of golf.com, 7.5.
So it's just like,
it's a slog.
Yeah.
Because you referenced Tiger Woods. So we were mostly limping. I always say that we were like partly alive and partly dead, or mostly dead, as we were waiting for the economy to bounce back. And thanks to Tiger, right, coming onto the scene, golf was exploding.
Yeah.
And so that's when the ad, business started to pick up.
Transformative.
Absolutely.
It was a huge...
And so, we knew we could win, and he's like one of the best salespersons out there. And we waited for that. And, when we sold the company, we were psyched. It was like a win on the board. You actually pinned me very well. It's not that I like to win. I don't like losing. And so I felt like we had a win. And Mike then had to go do his earnout. They didn't need an operator, clearly, at TAM Inc. And
maybe they did. They're not in existence anymore.
Well, you never know. And then I was giving birth to our third child, our daughter Viv, and Facebook opened up their platform, and he turned to me literally, I would say 10 minutes after giving birth, and said, I know what we're going to do next. I was delirious. It was like a perfect timing. I'm like, what?
And you're probably thinking, oh, yeah, we're going to get the baby car seat ready.
I'm thinking he's bringing me sushi that I haven't had in 10 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so let's talk about the dynamic between you two, and also maybe dovetail that into how to pick the right partner.
Yeah.
And that could extend beyond, a romantic relationship. It could be business partner or co-founder or whatever. So talk about how you guys divide roles. It seems like you're the operator, but also the strategist.
I would say operational strategist.
Yeah.
So Mike is this visionary. He is, obviously he can see anything in terms of like a business model and how to monetize it, does sales, partnerships, and really good at product. Like, what is it that you're selling? We share the go-to market strategy, but anything that has to get executed, it's on my side. Anything to do with people, it's on my side. Anything to do with like back office, legal, accounting, that's me.
Yeah.
And execution is 99% of the business. As you know, I mean, you're a great entrepreneur, like doing what you say you're going to do, getting it done on time, people, hiring, firing, it's all about execution. And so the ideas come to me easily. I have probably pitched her 1,000 ideas. We greenlit.
I have this idea. I need...
Yeah, like that's the smart kid. That's every day.
Yeah.
And
literally every day outside the shower, he'll be like, I have an idea. I'm like,
and so the why the partnership works, which is important for all partnerships, is we don't step on each other's toes.
Yeah.
Right. I'm in my lane. She's in her lane. We come together for important things.
Yeah.
But if we were both engineers, if we were both sales, if we were both operators, it would have been much more difficult. And what happens, you build a trust, like in any relationship.
Yeah.
That she knows that I'm going to do my work. I know that it's going to be done. Like she's going to execute. Sometimes it's frustrating, right? Hey, you want to watch a show? She's like, yeah, I'd love to, but I have like 4 more hours of work. Like, see you in the morning, mate. But that's her life.
Thanks
like,
for
do I even
that.
have to?
Thanks for admitting that.
Yeah, I'm not great at night. Like, I'm just saying. Like, I get.
But you know what the other
I'm
thing
great
is?
in the morning. I wake up and I'm ready to go. She's a little slower in the morning.
What I've noticed though, which is kind of unreal, is that when you have founders that overlap in their skill set, let's just call it 2 product people or 2 engineers.
I'm imagining a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm visual that way.
The decision making gets paralyzed because you start to micromanage each other, and you can't say, wait, this is his or her expertise. Like, okay, I'm going to trust this decision. I don't know if I totally understand it, or I don't know if I agree with it.
Right.
And you literally have paralysis. We've seen it all the time. Because you get these companies and there's like 2 product guys or 2, salespeople, like, saleswomen and all this stuff. And it never works. It literally never works.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that because both ideas could be good.
Yeah.
And it could also kind of be like, where do you want to go for dinner tonight?
Right.
Well,
there's just no decision then.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So then you're just stuck. And with entrepreneurship, like when you are an entrepreneur, you have to understand you're going to make millions of decisions. Most of them are going to be wrong. You got to be able to pivot, right? And if you're literally micromanaging your partner, it's never going to happen.
Right. Okay. So begs the question. So then how do you then seek out that partner? Like, how do you then begin to vet? Is it all about like skill set? Like
it is.
A lot of
So
and also work ethic.
So if you're a founder, and it's interesting because our oldest son is now going through his entrepreneurial journey. He has a company. And
how old is he? Give us context.
He's 23,
Okay.
COVID kid, meaning college during COVID. And he is more like me than Kass, so much better on vision, product, and creative. And he found, really one of his best friends is one of the best engineers I've ever met, right? And so I look at them as like, frick and frack, right? They fit so well together.
Yep.
And those who get that right, it makes everything else easy. And what I would do when you start, whether it's a restaurant or, hair salon, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you're starting the business, who is your co-founder? If you want a co-founder, we're cool with solo founders. If that's the way you want to go, we think it's lonelier and there's some issues there, but there are issues on both sides. Figure out and really dive, what are your strengths? Be self-aware, and then find someone to complement those.
And I would say too that you got to understand work ethic, because I think what we see a lot is that sometimes there's this one of the co-founders just is thinking this is like a glorious thing. Like I'm going to make a lot of money. I don't have to put in any extra hours.
Yeah.
Things like that. So you got to make sure you have the same work ethic, that this is going to be what you live, eat, breathe. Like this is what you're doing. And these people, this partner, we're married. So obviously we see each other literally when we wake up, but it's not unlike a co-founder relationship that you text the person that your co-founder in the morning and at night before you go to sleep.
Yeah. Or all throughout the day. Hey, I just saw this. Did you see it?
Yeah.
What should we do? So many questions. I'd probably talk for, let's agree to do a part 2 just on relationships.
Sure.
Because I think that's so important. And I feel like I really got lucky. But maybe, can we just pull out a couple of real world examples where that didn't go so well? Like I'm thinking of a big co-working brand that had co-founders, with very, it was yin and yang, I would say. But can you think of any other?
We've gotten it wrong.
Yeah.
I started a business with a friend who was an artist, and Kass the whole time was like, this is after Salesforce.
I wasn't a part. Can you say
He was like,
wrong?
Yeah, I got it wrong. But Kass like, I don't know about this. Like, we love the guy, and he had a brilliant idea and a whole system that he'd invented. I'm like, I can be the business guy behind.
Oh, is this your artist friend that you talked to her about this?
And it was a disaster because we hadn't talked about the threshold issues of who's going to make decisions, how hard are we going to work, what's the vision for the business. And so, when you look at co-founder relationships, we look at the ones that went really well. Those are the ones who are celebrated, right? So Charlie and Warren, right? Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, those get celebrated. But the reason why companies fail is because they fight internally versus help their customers solve their problems, right?
Yeah.
Once you start spending your time on internal stuff,
over.
Yeah. So do you recommend, I'm kind of just thinking out loud here, on my production company side of business, we have a contract, we have an agreement. And what contracts are good for is just really for clarification.
Right.
It's just a delineation of okay, I'm going to do this.
Right.
And you're going to do that. And then we both agree to do this. And then if this happens, if we decide to break up, here's what happens if we break up. Here's who owns what. Would you suggest a prenup style contract for co-founders?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I think we've done it in a very informal way, and we've suggested our companies that we've invested in do it, because you start a company, you have an idea. We're talking seed, right? They're just sprouting up, trying to figure this idea. We said it to our son Myles, you got to put on paper who is doing what. So the only way you're going to know that is if you think about all the things that have to happen in a company, right? You're going through every bucket. So there's product, there's engineering, there's customer feedback, there's marketing, whatever. And we did that in the very beginning, even before we knew we were doing it at golf.com. And then obviously when we hit Buddy Media, it was easier, but this is what you have to do.
I think,
I don't know if anyone would sign the contract though.
I think that's the bare minimum. That's table stakes is what happens if one of you leaves or dies,
that's
or
you do that in the actual stock agreement.
But you should have that just because this is a legal entity. I found that contracts do very little. Our whole philosophy is just do the right thing. Like we never look at the contracts, right? We're constantly doing stuff that aren't in the contracts, right? Like we go above and beyond.
Well, sure. There's a lot of,
but you need to have a bare minimum understanding.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking about this as a new business idea. Let's sort of like vet it out right now. Like, how about if I start a business that basically has like some licensed therapists on board and some attorneys, and then some people with experience with co-founders, and then like basically it's a session where you can sort of vet out the partnership.
Right. Yeah. It's like a mediator.
A mediator.
And you come in. It's a therapist, really, but you're going through. Okay, so Myles, you're going to do this. Max, you're going to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it builds into like a matchmaking service where it's like, okay, well, if you decide that you two are not compatible, we actually have 2 or 3 others.
It's a matchmaking game show. I love this.
Well, some of the best VCs, so we just had dinner with like 2 of the top VCs in New York City, and this is a real issue. They are now incubating companies because they know what types of founders they think work well together.
Yeah.
And so they're basically matchmaking, providing capital. And typically they have an idea, but sometimes one of the co-founders comes with an idea. And they've been incredibly successful doing this.
Yeah. Maybe I'm onto something.
Maybe you are. And if you can then come up with all the contracts right there.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, basically then the legal experts, but also the people with experience of,
expectations. Yeah.
Then you just map it all out. And of course, it can be a working document, but at least you have.
But also think about going into hiring then, which would be really cool. Because I think also when you see entrepreneurs right from the beginning, they get stuck on who to hire next.
Right.
And they need to hear from experts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is you need the CFO, but other times you need the distribution person.
Or you need a bookkeeper. It's not a CFO.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Right?
I like this idea. Maybe something in it.
You'd have to figure out how to have repeat customers though.
Yeah.
If you guys launch this, can I invest?
Yeah, absolutely. You're seeing it here live. Which reminds me too. So you mentioned these 2 successful New York investors. You're not dropping names. That's fine. I know you talk about like Ron Conway in the book and some of these other iconic investors. I have heard around the streets, around the block, that despite some of these epic failures, or what people on the outside might see as failures, even these founders that have taken companies to 9+ figures and crashed the ship into the rocks, they are still considered these unicorns that people want to work with. So even though they're like a train wreck, and I'm thinking of one that maybe started this company that tried to replace taxis at first, who had a lot of personal problems and ended up getting ousted as the CEO. That person is still coveted, in the investment community as a unicorn. What's your take on that as active investors now? Like, are those people dangerous, or do you view them as valuable?
For the most part, like you asked about failure earlier.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about failure, but then the success, right? So to us, failure is not kind of a snapshot that's locked, right? Every failure opens up opportunities that you may not know about, right? So you get rejected for a job, or a client says no, or the company goes out of business.
Yeah.
Like, what's worse, like staying in business for 30 years and then going out of business? Like, going out of business could be the best thing that happens because it opens something.
That's right.
Now, with Travis, he has incredible strengths. I mean, he moves mountains. He can get people around him.
Excitement.
He's very aggressive. He's a visionary, and he can operate, and he's super rich. So he's putting in money, into his new business, right?
Yeah.
And so he has proven that he can get things done at the highest levels. And if all of our failures are like Travis, like game on, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Same with Adam, right? At WeWork, you mentioned earlier, and he has a new business, Flow, that raised billions of dollars from Andreessen. Like, you can say a lot about Adam, and the media does. However, what did he do, right? He could tell a story. He could hire people. He could get people to run through a wall. And so those are skill sets that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
And the most successful entrepreneurs typically have done something before, right? Even if you look at kind of like Bill Gates and all, like, they were at it for a while.
Yeah. Bezos, is little book nerd for a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Before he became Daddy Warbucks or, remember what? Go, buffed out. Right?
Yes. Good one. Yeah.
Well, you don't have a lot. I mean, building Amazon, I can't imagine he had a ton of time to hit the gym every day. Now you make a little money, you have trainers, you got time, you have people working. It's easier. Like
protein.
We were combined 70 pounds heavier.
Okay.
At the end of Buddy Media. I'm not going to say who was carrying more weight, but let's just say I was.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's kind of like, making money does help with your health.
I agree. Once you, it's like that Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like first you're just worried about, do I have air to breathe?
Yes.
Food to eat, roof overhead. Okay. When you get a little success, a little, a couple clouds under your wings, then you're like, oh yeah, my health is declining and I'm nearly dead.
Yeah.
I need to get back to basics.
Exactly.
Sleep,
And then it gets to kind of the higher purposes, which is I think what we're trying to do with the book is like, we look at our life and it's been 50 years of like earning.
And building.
But like degrees and reputations and money. And so now we're like, okay, there's more, right? Like we still want to make money, don't forget. Like we're capitalists. But the impact that we're going to leave through the raising money for cancer research and helping other entrepreneurs and everything else, all of a sudden is more important to us. Whereas at golf.com, we've run out of money. We couldn't care less about cancer research.
And by the way, I love this sort of working example of the storyteller and then the truth teller tamping down. I mean,
listen to her.
2 years, Mike, give me a break. She's just truth telling and you're storytelling.
Yeah.
And so like we're just seeing the poetry in motion.
50 years. I had a rough 50 years.
Hey, listen, if you're buying it, if you're selling it, I'm buying it. Let's pivot to brand building because this show is called Behind the Brand. This series I started to really help people learn how to build their brand. When I started, I needed all this help and knowledge, and now I've asked like 500 different people, some of the smartest people on the planet, these kinds of questions. So how do you look at brand? How would you define brand? And then how would you define the Lazerow brand?
I am not a classically trained marketer. I want to say that from there's a lot of people that are way smarter than I am when it comes to marketing. I think the way I look at brand is how it makes people feel. So like I wanted a company that had a brand where specifically people wanted to come work for us. Like that was how I viewed the brand. And I thought that would help momentum with the company, right? So we could move faster, we could make decisions better, and then we could build a name from the very first touch point. So if you think about a brand, like what are the touch points? My first touch point was interviewing people. So for me, in my perspective, it was like, let's get all these great people, and then all these great people are going to want to work for us. And then on the side, I'm going to start building up what it is we do and how many people love what we do, right? So to me, brands are about like, how do you make people feel? We wanted to build like with Buddy Media, like the biggest brand. Our tagline was every brand needs a buddy, right? So here we are like coming up with a Facebook platform that helped big brands reach their customers on Facebook. And we wanted to be their advocate. So how do I have to figure out how to make that feeling in everybody around me, from an employee all the way to a client?
And it's not about money. I mean, the stuff that Kass did to build the brand with the marketing team, most of it didn't cost much. We hacked events. Like we showed up to South by Southwest with a golf cart that was serving coffee in branded cups. It cost nothing. People who were cold, hungover from the night before were like, thank you. Like every brand needs a buddy and coffee, right? We did airport ads that cost $1 million, but totally transformed. And when we eventually sold the business for close to $800 million, the number one reason is we were the leader in the space. And we becoming a leader more because of perception.
And that was it. Perception.
Then like our software was better.
Yeah. Perception had to equal reality. And so I knew that if we could get, and this was just crazy because this was literally the start of social media, right? So why was I going to the board and pitching $1 million print ad campaign? I knew that I wanted to see our name associated with other Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
And if I could connect that, I could eventually say to everybody around us, look, we work with, all these Fortune 500 companies. Like, that's us.
Yeah. It's sort of like this self-fulfilling prophecy idea.
Yes.
Optics. We talked about optics all the time, how important that is, especially in, lights, camera, action business. If we come in, we film the pod with this, and, our guest is like, oh, my kid has that camera. What the hell?
What am I doing here?
Like, so optics sometimes matter. And I think that's also part of strategy. I love strategy so much. So like, to me, the brand piece of it is so important, but even a precursor to figuring out all the brand stuff is the strategy.
Yeah.
And also the self-awareness, which our mutual friend Gary Vee talks about all the time. Self-awareness is like the most important, thing that you can learn early. And the earlier you learn it, the better off you'll be.
Yeah.
But yeah, perception and reality, and then merging those two things, especially in the minds of the people who...
Right. You want them to do something for you?
Yeah.
You've got to make them feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so what is the Lazerow brand then?
I think I would say like Kass and Mike brand is helpful, generous, supportive. That would be for me what I want. Like, we help so many entrepreneurs on a weekly basis. And I think it couldn't be like a higher purpose for us now. It's because we've learned so much. Why not give that away?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think about it more as like any time people spend with us, whether it's with our content or in person, it's just a simple question. Like, was that worthwhile? Like, did that add to your life or subtract?
Right.
Because a lot of people subtract from our life, right? There's friction involved. We're like, oh, do we have to, like, dude, I'm not talking just family members, like people we work with and others.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just this concept that when we show up wanting to bring value, whatever that means, whether we're in a social setting, whether it's a business setting. So then when we're all gone, people are like, hey, were they helpful? Like, were they worthwhile to spend time with?
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I liked it. I liked my time with them.
I love that advice. So I'll just underscore kind of what I'm hearing. And that is, like, before you even get to the value giving,
Right.
you have to understand what's valuable.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a different conversation with each person.
Right.
And so I think probably some of the best advice I've ever heard is, and I sort of stumbled onto it when I met my mentor, Seth Godin, and I really desperately needed and wanted Seth's attention. I accidentally asked the best question I could have ever asked, which is, what's important to you?
Right.
And I'm blown away how infrequently people who want stuff from me
Right.
ask me even what's important to me.
Yeah.
They never ask.
It makes sense. I mean, we have this thing, like, every time, I mean, if there's any ask that we're making, it's not just like, what can you give me? At the end, we're always like, okay, so how can we help you?
Right. Yeah.
And it's the same.
And just give us one thing. Like, don't give us 10.
Yeah.
Like, what's the most important? Like, if you could just like snap your fingers and we can help out, what's going to be transformative? We ask entrepreneurs every meeting.
I love that help question. I'm also, maybe it's just me, like, I'm cautious about that, the way of asking, because me, if you ask me what I need help with, I don't need any help. And that's my wall going up a little bit. Like, I don't want you to perceive me as weak or...
Interesting.
There's maybe sometimes a power dynamic.
Well, maybe that's why we should switch it to your question, which is, what's important to you?
Well, how can we help?
Well, so...
Like, honestly, like, if we ask you right now, like, how can we help you in your life?
But I think there's some arrogance that what we're saying is, I think what you're getting at is there's an arrogance that there might be an assumption that you need help, is what we're asking.
Look, we need a lot of help, and we're going to ask you for a lot of help.
Well, and we're talking this out, right, in real time. But it's maybe something to think about.
But I agree there's a difference, and I hadn't heard it that way before. I hadn't really thought that if I say, how can I help you, it means you need help.
Right. That would especially kind of trigger me in my 20s when I thought,
Totally.
like, oh, I need to speak more formally when older people are in the room, or like I need to dress or put on airs. Like, I wasn't a truth teller. I was embellishing a lot in my 20s to compensate.
Think about these young people. I think about the very young entrepreneurs, even like our son. I say, like, okay, what do you need? And it does trigger him. Like, it's not just about need. Maybe I just want to talk. even if they're not realizing that is a need.
Yeah.
I like what's important to you.
Yeah. Or whatever language you use, you've got to get to that answer, however you get there. And so maybe you need more words than the ones that we're offering right now. But at the end of it, you have to understand really at the heart of it, what is important to that person at that given time. Sometimes, and this will change, I think, with each season. Like, if you would have asked me in 2008 when I needed, it's like, shit, I need a bank to say yes to my loan application because I need a small business loan. And all the banks in 2008 rejected me.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a lot of resentment for big banks. Even now, like, I'll say all the words, like,
right.
Forget it.
For sure.
Today.
Right. You're right. It does change. It's funny you say this because whenever I go into a setting, I don't say, what do you do to anybody? Because they don't know who I'm talking to. I say, how do you spend most of your time?
Right.
Because I have no idea what they're doing. And it could change.
Right.
I don't know if they've lost a job or they don't work or they're doing the hardest job in the world, which is taking care of children.
Right.
I have no idea. They might be taking care of their parents.
That's right.
So you're right. That intention, you got to be intentional about how you ask things.
But I think you're so spot on. Like, when you understand how you can deliver value and when you deliver it, then you're creating kind of like what it sounds like your brand is about, which is loyalty.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Like, people.
You're right. That is the end result.
Right.
Right.
So, like, Gary writes in the foreword how grateful he is, even now, all these years later, after Vayner's this huge success, that you gave him a conference room to work out of.
Yeah.
So generous, even though you didn't have a lot to give. I mean, he would like fall on a sword for you.
Yeah, he would.
And that's pretty amazing. So maybe that's the message about building trust and loyalty. I love that.
There's also the more like, the more we give, well, just the more we get. Like, we've raised and given millions of dollars to cancer research. What we've gotten through that community is so much more. It's why we're giving the proceeds of the book to it. Because it's like, it's friends, it's cures, it's being able to walk people in who maybe couldn't afford treatment, but because they're important to us, they get greenlit for certain things, right? And so, not why we started out doing this stuff, but, we've gotten so much more, even out of some of our biggest giving exercises.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of brings it back full circle to this counterintuitive thinking that truth-telling is the way to, build trust, but generosity is the way to have abundance.
Right.
Right. And sometimes it's scary to like,
right. Put it out there.
Put it out there and give.
Well, you also started the whole podcast saying about relationships. I had this conversation with my middle son. He had this interview and he's like, well, it wasn't really an interview. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it was just a conversation, And I said, no, actually, hon, like everything you do is a situation in which you can either add to the conversation or you can take it away. So you can look at it like everything's an interview, but every conversation helps you build a relationship. And that's the most important thing you can do, right? In life, in business, in everything. You build relationships.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that, tracking my roots.